What's up YouTube? In this video we're going to be covering how to build a CMS powered collection interactive map. So you'll be able to hover over each of the dots on any point of the map and it will show the name of each location, and when you click on that it will take you to the location collection page. So this is great for companies that need to show all their locations and be able to let users get more information about each one. This is going to be built completely inside of Webflow, and we'll be making it responsive across mobile and tablet devices as well. So let's dive right in. So on the page inside the hero, I have this hero maps div. And then inside that div, we're just going to need to drag one more div that's our actual container. So the C hero map, we're just defining a width on that map so it stays a certain width. And then this, we'll call this C map, this div inside, C map contain. And we'll set the position to relative, so anything we anchor absolute alongside the corners will be stay in this container. So inside that relative container, we need to drag the image of our map, and then this can be an SVG, PNG, whatever you prefer there. And then we'll just call this CMap image. And then we want to make sure that image spans 100% width of its parent. And we'll set its position to relative, so we can set a z-index on it, and we'll say z-index is 1 for that. So then from there we need to create our collection. So we'll create a new collection and we'll call it locations, and then we'll have the location name as one of the first fields, and then you can really add whatever you'd like to this, but two things it will need is we're going to need this Ycoordinates field. And actually that needs to be a number field. That way they can't enter anything except a number into this field. So we'll have a field for Y-coordinates, we'll make it required. We're not going to allow negative numbers. We will allow decimal points, and then we're just going to save. We're not going to set a min or a max. And then one more field, and this one's going to be for the X-coordinates. And again, allow decimal points, make it required, not negative. No min and max. And that's everything we need for that collection. So what we can do is just create a few locations. I'll call this location 1 for now, and then we'll maybe set 0.5 and 1.5 for the coordinates. And then we'll see how this looks once we start building it out. So what we're going to need now is actually the card that's going to be clickable. So this will probably be in a link block, that way we can click it. So I'll drag that inside the map container, and then so in CMap, this will be CMap dot, and this will hold the dot that's actually clickable and goes to the collection page. So we need to position it absolute, that way it goes on top of the map, and we'll position it absolute to the top left corner and give it a z-index of like 20, that way it's pretty high above everything else. And that's looking pretty good. Then we can set some margin, and so for all the sizes we need to use a value called EM instead of pixels. So if I type 2 and then the letter E then the letter M and hit enter, you'll see it converted it to 2EM. I could also just click on this and change it from pixels to EM. That's going to help when we're making this scalable for mobile, so we need to make sure we're using EMs for any value we set inside this container. So we have that piece. Next piece we're really going to need is the actual circle itself. So I'll drag that inside the map dot, and we'll call this C map circle. And then again, we need to set any values we use using EM. So I'll set a width and height using EM. Set a kind of a color on the dot. Maybe make it white. Round off the radius. Just styling it right there. And then inside that we can set that to relative. We'll drag in another dot that goes inside that circle. CMap fill. And so this circle is just going to be a little bit larger than the parent circle, and we'll again give it a radius. Give it sort of a background color. We want it to be behind the white circle, so I'll set its position to relative and do -1 for the z-index, so that way it's behind. And then we'll grab the parent circle CMap circle and use Flexbox to kind of try and center it up inside its parent. And this one's going to need a minimum width of 2 EM and a minimum height of 2 EM. That way Flexbox doesn't stretch it out. So that's looking pretty good. I may increase the size slightly, maybe 2.5 for all these values, and just see what that looks like. So once we have our dot and we're pretty happy with it, now we just need the title. So the title of this item, we're just going to use a paragraph for. It's going to be right here, and it will probably say like the location name. And I'm actually going to want that to be on above the dot, and then I'll give it a class of CMap underscore location. And then the map dot, the whole map dot container, I want to sort of do flexbox, and then center and align or justify to the end. And then the location, we're going to want to set the font size using EMs, again, because everything in here needs to be set using EMs, and set the margin from the dot using EM as well. So that should do the trick right there. So we'll just have the location name and the actual dot, and that's looking pretty good. Actually, we're going to want this location name to be absolutely positioned around the dot. So what we can do is grab CMap dot. It's already set to absolute. The location name we can set to position absolute to the top left corner, I believe. And then from there, we want to set it not to wrap. So breaking would be no wrap. That way it doesn't stack on a new line. We don't need this margin anymore. Actually, we can probably push this out using percentage, I want to say. So if I do negative 100%, let's text align it to the right. And let's see what we can do. If we anchor it here. There we go. So let's just give this a margin EM. All right, that way the dot's really the only thing that's clickable, and this location name's just going to slide out for each one. So we'll give it a margin right there, and it's position absolute with text align left, and that seems to do the trick. So that's everything we need for our dot, and then we can basically position this dot anywhere on the map that we like using this margin, top and bottom. And now we just need to set up sort of an interaction. So we can kind of set up an interaction, and we would want to link this to the map dot that on hover of the class, and this would only happen on desktop. We'll create something called dot in, and then we want to select the kind of this fill circle, and we'll scale it up. And we'll also kind of turn its opacity down. Something like that. And then we can grab the location name, and the location name by default really should be opacity of 0, and it should be display none. We don't want to see it at first, so we'll change that to display none. And then once we decide to animate it, the location name will be display block, and we'll want to fade the opacity up to 100. So let's see what that looks like. So the dot kind of grows out, the location fades in, and one thing that could be cool too is having the location sort of slide out. So we can say move it by 100% of its width, and then this move would change it back to 0%. Let's see what that looks like. So now it just kind of slides out like that and fades out. We probably want the location to slide out after the dot grows. So I'll delay this a little bit, And I'll add in kind of like an easing to all of these. Maybe outport. Yeah, that looks good. So the dot grows, the location name kind of slides out, and we have our animation. Maybe I won't make it so drastic, so maybe we move it 50% initially instead of 100. Yeah, much better. Okay, so that's our animation, and now all we had to do is create a new animation for the dot out effect. So we'll just duplicate this, and this one will be, we'll call it dot out. And then from here, we really just need to return all these values to the way they were initially. So I'll uncheck these as initial states. By the time this is all done, we know we want to hide the location name. We want to move it so opacity back, and then we want to scale the map fill back to 1, and we also want to take the map fill opacity back to 100%, and then we can sort of add our easing output, and this time we want to delay the fill because we want the sort of the name to slide in first, then the fill to appear. So let's preview that and see what we have. We hover over, slide out. Yep, so we have a nice little interaction happening there. So that should do the trick for that part. We have that set up. What we can do now is go ahead and just publish this. And we're going to grab a little bit of code right here. So if we right click in Chrome and click inspect, we can sort of grab this whole map. We want to grab this whole where it says ahref, this whole link block to the map dot class. We want to just copy that. So if you hit Command C on your keyboard, it's going to copy that dot and everything inside it. And now I actually don't need this one anymore, so I'm just going to, for now, get it out the way. I'll add a class of isHidden and just set it to display none. That way we're just kind of hiding that initial dot. So now we need to add in our sort of collection. So I'm going to drop in a collection list, and that is right here, into the map contain, and then we'll get this from locations. And then we'll kind of just give this a class. And then so we want to position it absolute to where it covers everything, and then we want to give it a higher z-index than the map image because it needs to be on top, so we'll give it a z-index of 3 for now. And then the list right here just needs to be 100% width and height of the parent, and then it needs to be position relative so that the item can be absolute and can cover the whole parent. So 100% width and 100% height of the collection list. So that's perfect. Now we have a collection item kind of covering everything, and then inside there we're going to be able to just sort of add in our dot. So I'll need a custom code embed to go inside the collection item, and then in here we can paste all that code we just copied and save it. So now we see that dot's there that we had before, and I need this embed to be 100% width and 100% height of the collection item. So that dot's in there, we have that set up, and now we just need to kind of get some information. So if we open up the HTML embed, and we can kind of scroll back, we're looking for the, let's see, we're looking for the name, the location name. So right here where it says location 1, we can select over that, and we can replace that with the location name from the collection item right there. So whatever a client puts here, it'll be in there. And then also the link block, we're going to need to set kind of like, if I can find the href all the way at the beginning. So right here we're going to want it to set it to https:// and then whatever the name of our website is, So in this case, our domain is this. And then we want to do the collection name, which I believe is locations slash slug name. So basically this is going to, whenever we click this link block, it's going to take us to that collection page that we have set up. The last thing we need to do is pull the position of this dot from the CMS X and Y coordinates. So I'll leave this in the description of the YouTube video, but this style code we can actually paste honestly right before or after the class name. I'll paste it after, right before this open tag. So I'll hit a space and then paste. And then where it says Y coordinates, we need to select over and change that to be the Y coordinates field. And then where it says X coordinates, we need to select over, change that to the X coordinates field and delete that. So then that should be everything we need for this part. So now you can see we're kind of affecting where this dot is on the map based on the what we enter into the collection. So by using margin left and margin top and using EMs for the value. So if we were to go back into the collection, we can test this out and see how it's working. So if I were to set, say, maybe the Y coordinates to something like 5 and save this, you'll see now it's way down. And then if I go back over here, set the X coordinates to something like 8, it should be pretty far over. So yeah, it moved it pretty far over. So if you want to get a better idea for what values you're going to need, you could use the original map dot that we hid, just remove that class is hidden, and sort of adjust these values in real time to get an idea for where it's going to need to be. And then one other thing we do need to do is the HTML embed. We need to define a font size. So right now, 14 pixels. Just to make sure that that font size is set and it's not being inherited from the body right there on the HTML embed. So I believe that is most of what we have, but let's go ahead and try and add another dot and you'll see kind of something that we're going to run into an issue. So if we could do location 2 and maybe we make this one 10 and 12 for the coordinates. And it should add in that second location onto our HTML. Let's see, so we have the collection item. Maybe it's not refreshing. There we go, location 2. So I'm going to move that one over just a little bit further. So maybe I'll do 20 and 20. All right. So from here, we can hover over, like, say, we could hover over this collection item because it's kind of later on the page, but we can't hover over the first location because the item in the HTML embed is covering up the first location because all these collection items are layered directly on top each other. So to fix that, we're actually going to need the class name that we set up for this map dot. So the CMap dot, which is this link block, is the only thing we really want to be clickable. We don't want the collection wrapper or anything else inside the collection wrapper to be clickable. So what we're going to need to do is drag in a custom code embed onto the page. And then in here, we're going to have to add 2 style tags. So we can target a class by hitting dot, a period, and then we'll type the collection wrapper for the class name. And then to disable this being clickable, we're going to, inside here, we're going to add pointer events none. And then we need to make the link clickable. So the CMap dot, the opposite of that is we'll add pointer events auto. And now the dot should be clickable, but the actual everything else should not be clickable. So if we were to go ahead and publish this, we'll be able to see, you can't really test the hover states in Webflow, but you can test them on the live site. So I'm going to refresh this, and then we can hover over this one, we can hover over that one. Perfect, perfect. So the last thing we need to do, I'll go ahead and add in a few more dots, just so we have some more dots to be able to test things with. 24, and let's add in one more location. Let's do 30 and, well, let's do 10, 30 maybe. Let's see, where is it putting these? Yeah, that'll work. So we have those in. The last thing we need to really do is just make this responsive. So on mobile, this container is being stacked underneath. So what we can do is grab this C hero map, and the width was set here. We can set the width to 100%. That way it's kind of just full width, and we can add some top margin too. That way we're taking it off of the top there. But the only problem is we need sort of like these dots to still align in the right place. So before we had a fixed width and height map, so the dots were kind of always in the right place, but now that the map is scaling with the browser width, these dots aren't necessarily positioned correctly. So what we're going to need to do is grab the HTML embed, and then for font size, we're going to need to set the font size using viewport width. That way, it's actually, these dots will actually kind of scale with the width of the browser, and they'll stay locked in place as we resize the browser. So I need to make sure that like this dot looks like it's in the exact same place pretty much as it was on desktop. Everything looks correct. So as we scale down to mobile, you'll see they're still scaling in the right place. So everything's working as we would expect. So if we go back to the live site, we should be able to test this out, and it should be, we should be able to test it out, and it should all be working. Yep, each location name, and if we were to click on this, it would take us to the collection page, which right now is empty. So right now it's just going to be a plain white page if it does go there, but it would eventually take us to that page. So yeah, that's everything for making a responsive CMS-powered map in Webflow.